Deep within the vast reaches of uncharted space, a derelict ship drifted through the void, abandoned to the silence of eternity. For decades, perhaps centuries, it had been a ghost, lost to the dark sea of stars. Now, it was about to meet its first visitor, a 17-year-old human girl named Kaya, whose fate was about to change forever. Kaya was no ordinary teenager. Growing up as a stowaway on various trade ships, she had seen more of the galaxy than most people twice her age. She had learned to navigate the complex politics of interstellar life, hiding in the shadows, surviving by her wits. Yet, in all her years, she had never been prepared for this. The vessel she stood on now wasn't a ship she knew. Its architecture was distinctly alien, something she had never encountered before. There were no markings, no identifiers, just a cold, metallic hull that hummed with an eerie, otherworldly energy. She could feel it, a low pulse in the air, as if the ship were alive, breathing in the quiet of space. The entrance she had used to sneak inside was now sealed behind her, and with no other options, Kaya moved cautiously through the dark corridors, her hand trailing along the smooth, metallic walls. Her breath echoed softly in the helmet of her EVA suit. She was utterly alone, but alone was nothing new for her. Alone had been her constant companion ever since she was separated from her parents on a distant colony world during a pirate raid. She never knew if they had survived, but after years of being on the run, she had accepted the reality of her solitude. What she wasn't prepared for was what awaited her in the heart of the ship. The deeper she ventured into the vessel, the more she noticed that the design grew intricate, as if the ship had been crafted with intention, with artistry. The walls pulsed softly with dim blue lights, leading her forward, almost guiding her. It wasn't long before she entered what appeared to be a control room, a vast, circular chamber filled with alien technology beyond her comprehension. And at the center of it all was an object that took her breath away. Suspended in a field of blue energy, as though cradled by invisible hands, was a suit of armor unlike anything she had ever seen. Sleek, intricate, and humming with an unearthly glow, it looked both ancient and advanced at the same time. Its smooth, silvery exterior pulsed with blue circuits that seemed to be alive, moving beneath the surface like streams of light. The sight of it was mesmerizing, captivating. Instinctively, Kaya stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat as she reached out a trembling hand. For a moment, she hesitated. Everything about the armor seemed too perfect, too inviting, like a predator luring its prey. Yet, in that moment of indecision, the ship shuddered around her, a soft tremor that made her realize something vital. The ship was still alive, and whatever had brought her here, it had been intentional. Suddenly, the energy field surrounding the armor flickered, and in one swift motion, it collapsed, leaving the armor standing on its own. As if waiting for her, it shifted slightly, the front panel opening in a smooth, silent invitation. Kaya's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The ship had sealed her in. Besides, something about the armor called to her, like it was meant for her, like it had been waiting all this time just for her. She stepped forward, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. The moment her fingers brushed against the armor's cold surface, it responded. The pieces shifted and molded, wrapping around her body like a second skin. It was a perfect fit, as if custom-made for her. A soft hum filled her ears, and a blue light pulsed from the chest plate, sending a wave of energy through her. The transformation was instantaneous. Her vision sharpened. Her body felt lighter, stronger. The armor had bonded with her, becoming part of her. It wasn't just a suit, it was alive, and now, so was she, in a way she had never imagined. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was something more, something powerful. As Kaya looked down at herself, her hands trembling inside the sleek, metallic gloves, she realized that the armor wasn't just a weapon. It was a living entity, and it had chosen her. The glowing blue light in the center of her chest thrummed with energy, a heartbeat in sync with her own. The ship rumbled again, more violently this time. Red lights flashed in the corners of the room, and alien symbols scrolled across the consoles. Something had been triggered. Something was waking up. and Kaya was at the center of it all. Suddenly, the room's walls began to shift. Panels slid open to reveal large, clear windows looking out into the vastness of space. Kaya's breath caught in her throat as she saw it. The reason the ship had awoken. A massive, ominous silhouette loomed in the distance, its shape blocking out the distant stars. It was another vessel, one far larger than the one she stood on, and it was closing in fast. Her first instinct was to run, but the armor had other plans. The blue circuits running along her arms pulsed, and before she could even process what was happening, the alien technology in the control room sprang to life. The consoles lit up, and the ship responded to her presence, its systems awakening as if recognizing her as its new captain. The ship groaned as its engines roared back to life. Kaya stumbled slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden surge of energy coursing through the vessel. She could feel it now. The ship was alive, connected to her through the armor. It was no longer just a derelict hulk. It was a weapon, and she was its pilot. But as the massive silhouette in the distance grew closer, Kaya realized she wasn't prepared for what was coming. Whoever or whatever was on that approaching ship, they were coming for her. The armor had given her power, but it had also made her a target. She had to think fast. As the ship's systems hummed with renewed life, Kaya moved to the nearest console, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. To her surprise, the armor seemed to understand the technology, guiding her movements with a precision she never could have achieved on her own. Within seconds, the ship's weapon systems were online, and the targeting interface lit up in front of her. A warning alarm blared, and the screens around her showed the incoming vessel launching what could only be described as attack drones. Sleek, predatory machines that swarmed toward her ship like a cloud of angry wasps. Kaya's pulse quickened. She had never been in a battle before, let alone in command of an alien warship. But the armor didn't hesitate. It moved with purpose, directing her hands as the ship's defenses activated. A sudden burst of light erupted from the ship's cannons, and the drones exploded in a dazzling display of fire and debris. But more kept coming. There were too many of them, and Kaya knew she couldn't hold them off forever. Her mind raced. She had to escape. But how? That's when she saw it, on the edge of the control screen, a blinking icon. It wasn't a weapon. It was something else, something hidden deep within the ship systems. She didn't know what it was, but the armor urged her to activate it. With no other options, she did. The ship trembled violently, and for a moment, Kaya thought she had made a terrible mistake. But then, in an instant, the entire vessel vanished from its current location, blinking out of existence as if it had never been there at all. Kaya's stomach lurched as the ship reappeared somewhere else entirely. The stars outside the window were different. The drones, the massive ship, they were gone. But as she caught her breath, trying to steady herself, she realized that her journey had only just begun. Somewhere out there, someone, or something, wanted the armor she now wore. And they wouldn't stop until they had it. The stars outside the ship's windows were unfamiliar. Kaya stood at the console, her breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts, still feeling the aftershock of whatever jump the ship had just made. Sweat clung to her brow under the helmet, and her fingers trembled, hovering above the alien controls. It had happened so fast. One moment, she had been staring down an armada of drones, and the next, the ship had blinked out of existence. Now, it floated in silence, suspended in a region of space she couldn't recognize. Okay, what just happened? She muttered to herself, though her voice was barely more than a whisper. The armor's pulse matched her heartbeat, a strange synchronization that should have felt comforting but only made her more uneasy. Kaya had never been one for dependence on anyone or anything, and now here she was, entangled with an alien technology she barely understood, thrust into a battle she didn't ask for. The ship itself was ominously quiet. The hum of its systems, which had been overwhelming just moments before, was now muted, as if the entire vessel was holding its breath. It was as if something deeper was waiting, watching her, silently calculating her next move. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had brought her here wasn't done with her yet. She needed answers, fast. Kaya glanced at the control panel. The alien symbols were still incomprehensible, but the armor seemed to instinctively know what to do, guiding her hands across the smooth interface. Information flashed across the screens. Star charts, status reports, and then something that made her blood run cold. The signal. It was faint, barely discernible among the static of the ship's systems, but it was there. A repeating transmission, originating from the same massive vessel she had barely escaped. They were tracking her. Great, Kaya groaned, leaning back and exhaling sharply. Can't even disappear properly. She had been marked, hunted. Whoever was on that ship wasn't just interested in the armor. They were determined to find her. She wasn't just running anymore. She was being pursued by forces far beyond her understanding. Her thoughts spiraled. What did they want with her? Was this armor some kind of weapon in an interstellar war? Had she stumbled into something bigger than herself? Bigger than anything she had ever known? The questions buzzed in her mind like a swarm of angry bees. But there were no answers, at least not yet. Suddenly, the silence of the ship was shattered by a noise. Soft at first, but growing louder, more insistent. It was like a whisper, but not one from the outside. It was inside her head, a faint, rhythmic pulse that matched the glowing blue circuits of the armor. At first, she thought it was just the lingering effects of the jump, maybe a side effect of the energy field that had enveloped her. But the whisper grew, becoming clearer. Words. You are not alone. Kaya froze. The voice was calm, measured, and entirely alien. But she understood it perfectly. It wasn't human, not by any stretch, but it was speaking directly to her, through the armor, through the ship. She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the console for stability. Who's there? There was no response, at least not in words. But the ship seemed to react, the lights pulsing in rhythm with the voice. It wasn't just a ship. It was part of something bigger, something ancient, and it had chosen her. Panic clawed at the edges of her thoughts, but Kaya forced it down. She couldn't afford to lose control now. Not with an entire fleet on her tail. Not when she didn't even know where she was. A sudden noise broke the tension. Static crackled over the ship's comm system, followed by a voice she hadn't heard in years. A voice she never thought she'd hear again. Kaya? Is that really you? Her heart stopped. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. The voice on the other end of the comm was scratchy, broken by interference, but she recognized it instantly. Her father's voice. Dad? Kaya's voice came out as a shaky whisper, her mind reeling. She hadn't seen or heard from her father in nearly 10 years. He had been declared missing after the pirate raid that tore their family apart. Everyone had assumed he was dead. But here he was, speaking to her through the comms of a ship that shouldn't exist. It didn't make any sense. None of this made sense. Where are you? Kaya demanded, her pulse racing. How are you? I don't have much time, the voice interrupted, and now there was a strain in it, a desperation that sent chills down her spine. Listen to me carefully, Kaya. The armor you found, the ship, it's not what you think. It's alive. And the people chasing you, they'll stop at nothing to get it back. The signal crackled again, and for a moment, she thought she'd lost him. Panic seized her. Wait, Dad. Where are you? Are you still alive? A beat of silence. I'm not exactly what you remember, he finally said, the words heavy with something Kaya couldn't place. Regret? Sadness? She couldn't tell. I've been trapped in this war for years, trapped in this system, and now you've been drawn into it too. The ship's lights flickered again, a soft hum building in the air around her. Kaya felt her grip on reality slipping. How could her father, who had been presumed dead, be speaking to her now? How could he be part of this? None of it was adding up. I don't understand, Kaya said, shaking her head. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you find me? The pause that followed was the longest silence of her life. The ship seemed to hold its breath, and Kaya felt a knot form in her chest, an ache she hadn't felt in years. The same ache that had haunted her since she was a child, the ache of abandonment. You don't know what I've become, her father said finally, his voice breaking. What I had to do to survive out here. Before she could respond, the comms went dead. Kaya stood there, frozen, staring at the console as the reality of the moment sank in. Her father was alive. Or at least, something of him was. But he was caught in the same nightmare she had just stumbled into. And now, they were both trapped. The momentary shock of hearing his voice was quickly replaced by the cold dread of what he had said. The armor wasn't what she thought. It was alive. And worse, there were forces, far more powerful than anything she had imagined, hunting her down. Kaya slammed her fist into the console, the sound reverberating through the quiet ship. Tears of frustration burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was alone again. Even the brief flicker of hope she had felt upon hearing her father's voice had been extinguished by the chilling realization that whatever he had become, he was no longer the man she had once known. She had no choice now. She had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of whatever was coming for her. As if on cue, the ship's alarm blared to life, jolting her out of her thoughts. A new signal appeared on the console, and this time, there was no mistaking it. The fleet had found her again. Of course, Kaya muttered bitterly, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship lurched into motion, its engines roaring to life once more. She didn't need the armor to tell her what she already knew. They were closing in fast. And this time, there might not be another miraculous escape. Her pulse quickened as the ship shot through the stars, dodging and weaving through the debris of forgotten worlds. But the fleet was relentless, their ships faster, more agile. They were gaining on her, and she knew she couldn't outrun them forever. Then, as she glanced at the console, she saw something. A strange icon she hadn't noticed before, glowing faintly on the edge of the display. It wasn't labeled, but the armor seemed to react to it, urging her toward it. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Whatever this was, it was her only option. With a deep breath, Kaya activated the command. The ship's systems went dark for a moment, and then the entire vessel began to shake. The stars outside the window blurred as space itself seemed to bend around the ship. Kaya gripped the console, bracing herself for whatever was coming next. Then, with a sudden, violent jolt, the ship vanished into the unknown once more. And as the darkness swallowed her whole, she couldn't shake the feeling that this time, there might not be a way back. Kaya had always thought that space was cold, sterile even, but now, as her ship hurtled through the unknown, she felt something worse than cold. It was the chill of uncertainty, a gnawing emptiness where answers should have been. The stars outside were twisted, bending around the ship as it navigated some strange dimension that wasn't quite real. The jump she had initiated didn't just move her through space. It had taken her somewhere else. The ship's systems hummed low, almost as if they too were bracing themselves for what lay ahead. Kaya's hands hovered over the alien controls, but for the first time since she had put on the armor, the guiding pull she had felt, the intuitive connection between her and the vessel, was gone. She was flying blind. Her mind churned, replaying her father's voice over and over again. "You don't know what I've become." That phrase rattled inside her skull. What did it even mean? Had he turned into something monstrous? Something mechanical? Or worse, had he been broken in ways that couldn't be mended? Kaya shook her head, her teeth clenched in frustration. He had been her beacon for so long. The reason she kept moving, kept surviving. And now, she wasn't sure what was real anymore. But the universe didn't wait for answers. The ship jerked violently to the right, throwing Kaya against the console. Her breath was knocked out of her, and for a brief, terrifying moment, she thought the entire vessel was going to rip itself apart. The stars outside flickered like dying embers, and then everything snapped back into focus. Kaya coughed, gripping the edges of the control panel as she forced herself upright. Pain flared in her ribs, but she ignored it. She was alive, for now. The screen in front of her blinked to life, showing a vast structure looming ahead. It looked like a space station, but the design was too alien, too organic. Long, curved spires reached out from its core like the limbs of some enormous creature, and the surface pulsed with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. She had never seen anything like it. "Well, that doesn't look ominous at all," Kaya muttered under her breath, unable to keep the sarcasm at bay. There was irony in this. Being dragged across the universe by an alien ship, only to be dropped at the doorstep of something that looked like it had crawled out of her worst nightmares. Her laugh was hollow, humorless. She didn't even know what to expect anymore. Before she could react, the ship began its descent, the engines humming as if they were on autopilot. Kaya tried to wrestle back control, but it was useless. The vessel was going exactly where it wanted to go, and for better or worse, she was just along for the ride. The landing was smoother than she expected. The ship docked against one of the spires with a gentle hiss, and the moment it did, the entire structure seemed to react. Lights flared along the spire, casting the interior of the ship in a ghostly blue glow. Kaya swallowed hard, steeling herself as the boarding ramp descended with a soft mechanical click. For a moment, she hesitated at the top of the ramp, her hand brushing against the armor's chest plate. The blue light pulsed in time with her heartbeat, a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. Whatever the armor was, whatever connection it had to this ship, she would need it now more than ever. With a deep breath, Kaya stepped onto the ramp and descended into the unknown. The air inside the station was warm, almost stifling, and had an odd smell, like metal and earth mixed together, a scent that reminded her of decaying leaves in autumn. The ground beneath her feet felt strange, not quite metal, not quite stone. It gave slightly as she walked, as though the entire station were alive. She shuddered at the thought. Her footsteps echoed through the cavernous halls as she moved forward, her senses on high alert. There was something unsettling about the place. She could feel eyes on her, though she saw no one. The architecture of the station was impossible to decipher. Every wall and ceiling seemed to curve and shift, as if the structure were in a constant state of transformation. But no matter where she looked, there was no sign of life. Just as she was about to turn back to the ship, a soft, rhythmic noise reached her ears. It was faint, barely audible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She followed it, her heart pounding in her chest. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and at the center of it stood a tall, dark figure. Kaya's breath caught in her throat. It was him, her father, but not the man she remembered. The figure was tall and imposing, draped in some sort of dark, organic armor that seemed to be alive. His face, though mostly human, was marred by glowing lines of alien circuitry that pulsed in time with his breathing. His eyes, once warm and familiar, were cold, calculating. He stood there, waiting for her, his expression unreadable. "Kaya," he said softly, his voice no longer crackling through the comms. It was smooth, calm, and it sent a chill down her spine. "You came." Kaya could barely find her voice. What happened to you?" He tilted his head, studying her with a strange intensity. "I became part of something greater, something you're now connected to as well?" Kaya took a step back, shaking her head. "No, this isn't you. This isn't who you are." He smiled then, but it was a sad smile, full of resignation. "I didn't have a choice, and now, neither do you." Kaya's heart pounded in her chest, fear clawing at her insides. She had imagined this reunion so many times, but never like this. Never with her father standing in front of her, more alien than human, speaking as if his fate was already sealed, and hers along with it. "I won't be part of this," Kaya said, her voice trembling, but firm. "I don't know what's happening, but I'm not going to just give in." Her father's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of the man he used to be shining through the cold exterior. "I thought the same thing once. But the armor, what it's made of, what it's connected to, there's no escaping it. It chooses. It consumes." Kaya's blood ran cold. The armor, the ship, it was all part of something bigger, something she couldn't see yet. But she had felt it. How the armor guided her, controlled her. She had thought it was helping her, but now she wasn't so sure. Her father stepped closer, his voice lowering. "They'll come for you, Kaya. You've been marked by them now, just like I was. You're a part of the cycle. And if you don't learn to control it, to use it, they'll tear you apart." "Who are they?" Kaya demanded, her voice rising with a mixture of fear and anger. "What is this all about?" But her father didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the armor she wore, his eyes narrowing as if seeing something that wasn't visible to her. "The ship brought you here for a reason. It knows what you are, what you're capable of. But you need to understand. You need to make a choice. What choice? Kaya asked, frustration boiling over. What the hell are you talking about? His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, she saw the man she used to know. The father who had protected her, who had loved her. To embrace it, he said quietly, or to fight it. Before she could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The station groaned, the walls vibrating as if something massive was stirring deep within. Kaya's heart raced as she looked around, but her father remained calm, unmoved by the chaos erupting around them. They're coming, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You need to decide now. Kaya's mind spun. There were too many questions, too many things she didn't understand. The armor felt heavy on her shoulders, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something. But she was paralyzed by the enormity of it all. And then, without warning, her father turned away. He started walking toward a door at the far end of the chamber, his steps slow and deliberate. Kaya called out to him, but he didn't stop, didn't even look back. Wait. Kaya's voice cracked, desperation seeping into her words. Dad, please. He paused at the threshold, his hand resting on the doorframe. For a moment, she thought he might turn around, might explain everything, might tell her what to do. But when he finally spoke, his words were nothing more than a quiet echo in the vast chamber. Whatever you choose, don't let it break you. The door slid shut behind him, leaving Kaya standing alone in the empty chamber, the walls still trembling, the weight of her choice pressing down harder than ever. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to make it. The walls of the chamber continued to tremble long after Kaya's father disappeared. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the ground beneath her shifted like a living organism, pulsating with an unsettling rhythm. Everything felt wrong. The air, the strange, organic surfaces of the station, and the gnawing weight of the armor on her shoulders. It wasn't just heavy anymore. It felt alive, clinging to her, pulsing with the same eerie energy that echoed through the corridors. Her father's final words lingered in her mind, a quiet warning that gnawed at her every thought. Whatever you choose, don't let it break you. He had left her with nothing but more questions, a choice that felt impossible and a mounting sense of dread. But above all else, he had left her alone again. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, staring at the door he had vanished through. Part of her wanted to run after him, to demand answers, to force him to explain why he had abandoned her all those years ago and why he was abandoning her again now. But the other part of her, the part that had survived on her own for so long, knew better. There was no point in chasing ghosts. There never had been. With a frustrated growl, Kaya slammed her fist into the wall. The impact sent a jolt of pain through her knuckles, but it wasn't enough to ground her, to clear the fog of confusion clouding her thoughts. She wanted to scream, to tear the armor off her body and throw it to the ground. But even as that impulse flashed through her mind, she knew it was futile. The armor was part of her now, whether she liked it or not. Get a grip, Kaya, she muttered under her breath, running a hand through her damp hair. She could feel the sweat trickling down her back, mixing with the cold, metallic surface of the suit. It felt like being trapped in a cage. She needed to move. Staying in one place wasn't an option. Whatever was coming, whoever was coming, she had to be ready. The chamber's walls groaned as the tremors grew stronger. The ground shifted beneath her feet, and a sudden noise, a deep, resonating hum, echoed through the station. Kaya's heart lurched. It wasn't a mechanical hum. It was something more primal, more alive, like the beating of a heart, but on a scale too massive to comprehend. She turned sharply, scanning the chamber for any sign of what was happening. Her pulse quickened, and her instincts screamed at her to run. But where? There were no answers here, only the overwhelming sense that something was waking up, something ancient. The hum grew louder, and with it came a series of low, guttural noises that sent chills racing down Kaya's spine. It was as if the walls themselves were groaning in pain, shifting and twisting around her. The station, it wasn't just alive. It was reacting to her presence, to the armor. Great, she muttered bitterly, her eyes darting toward the far end of the chamber, where another doorway stood, illuminated by the faint blue glow of the bioluminescent walls. Because walking into an alien heart of darkness is exactly what I wanted to do today. Despite the sarcasm, there was no time to hesitate. The station was shifting around her, and she couldn't afford to stand still. She sprinted toward the doorway, her boots slamming against the uneven ground as she fought to maintain her balance. The walls seemed to undulate with every step, as though the station was trying to throw her off course, to trap her within its twisting corridors. The moment she crossed the threshold of the doorway, the chamber behind her sealed shut with a loud, bone-rattling thud. Kaya barely had time to react before the ground beneath her feet shifted again, this time more violently. She stumbled forward, her hands catching the edge of a control panel to steady herself. The air around her was thick, oppressive, as if the station itself was pressing down on her, forcing her to confront whatever lay ahead. The corridor she found herself in was narrower than the previous chambers, the walls curving inward as though they were closing in. The blue light that had once been faint now pulsed more brightly, illuminating the strange organic material that made up the station's structure. It was like being inside the belly of some great, slumbering beast. Kaya's breath hitched as she moved forward, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. What was this place? Why had the ship brought her here? And most importantly, what did her father mean when he said the armor was part of a cycle? She hated the idea of being a pawn in someone else's game, but every instinct told her that's exactly what she was. As she moved deeper into the station, the hum grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, something ancient and powerful, waiting for her. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a knot of dread tightening with every step. The corridor eventually opened into another chamber, this one smaller but no less unsettling. At the center of the room stood a massive, pulsating structure that resembled a heart, dark, twisted, and alive. Its surface glowed faintly, veins of blue light snaking across its surface like rivers of energy. Kaya's pulse quickened as she approached it, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to turn and run, to get as far away from this nightmare as possible. But another part, a deeper, more primal part, felt drawn to it, as though the armor itself was urging her forward, pulling her toward the heart of the station. As she stood before the pulsating structure, her breath caught in her throat. The blue light emanating from the heart seemed to resonate with the light in her chest, the circuits in her armor pulsing in time with the beat of the heart. The connection was undeniable. Instinctively, Kaya reached out a hand, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the surface of the heart. The moment her skin made contact, the entire station shuddered, the walls groaning in response. A surge of energy raced through her body, overwhelming her senses. She gasped, her knees buckling beneath her as the world spun around her. Images flashed through her mind, vivid, fragmented, and disorienting. She saw glimpses of a war, of vast fleets clashing in the void of space, of planets consumed by fire. And then she saw them. Shadowy figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes glowing with a fierce, otherworldly light. They were ancient, powerful, and they were coming for her. Kaya yanked her hand back, gasping for breath as the visions faded. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. The station had shown her something terrifying. But it wasn't just a warning. It was a glimpse of the future, of her future, and she wasn't ready for it. Before she could gather her thoughts, a voice echoed through the chamber, low and cold. It wasn't her father's voice this time. It was something else, something far older. You cannot run from this, child. Kaya's blood turned to ice as the voice reverberated through the chamber, filling the air with an oppressive weight. She looked around, searching for the source, but there was no one there, just the heart of the station, pulsing steadily in the center of the room. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her attempt to sound strong. "We are what has always been," the voice replied, calm and emotionless. "We are the architects of this cycle, the ones who built the armor you wear, and the ones who will decide your fate." Kaya's heart raced. The architects? The ones who built the armor? Everything she had been running from, everything she had feared, was somehow connected to them, to this ancient, shadowy force that had been manipulating events from the beginning. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The heart pulsed brighter, and the voice responded with chilling certainty. "We want you to embrace your destiny, to become what you were always meant to be." Kaya shook her head, backing away from the pulsating structure. "I'm not part of your cycle. I don't care about your plans. I just want to get out of here." The voice let out a soft, almost mocking laugh. "You cannot escape what is written in your very blood, Kaya. The armor has chosen you for a reason. You are bound to us, to this cycle, whether you wish it or not." Panic flared in Kaya's chest. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in around her. The weight of the armor, the weight of the choice her father had spoken of, threatened to crush her. She had always prided herself on being independent, on surviving on her own terms. But now she felt trapped. But then, in the depths of her fear, a spark of defiance ignited within her. "No," she said, her voice steadier this time. "I won't be your pawn. I won't be part of your cycle. If you want me to embrace this destiny, you'll have to force me." There was a pause, a long silence that stretched out for what felt like an eternity. The heart continued to pulse, the energy within it growing more intense, more volatile. Kaya could feel the pressure building in the room, the air growing thick with power. Then, the voice spoke again, softer. This time, but no less menacing. "So be it." Without warning, the ground beneath her feet shook violently. The walls of the chamber cracked, and a deafening roar filled the air. Kaya stumbled, barely managing to stay upright as the entire station seemed to come alive, reacting to the defiance in her voice. The heart at the center of the room pulsed brighter, and Kaya's armor responded in kind, the circuits in her suit glowing with an intense blue light. She could feel the power coursing through her, the armor feeding off the energy of the station, growing stronger with every passing second. But even as the power surged within her, she knew she was on the edge of something dangerous. The armor wasn't just a tool. It was alive, and it wanted to consume her, just as it had consumed her father. She had to make a choice. Now, with a deep breath, Kaya focused all her willpower on the armor, forcing it to obey her commands. She could feel it resisting, pushing back, but she refused to let it win. She wasn't going to be a pawn in anyone's game. Not the architect's, not her father's, and certainly not the armor's. The ground shook harder, cracks spreading across the walls and ceiling. The heart in the center of the room pulsed violently, sending waves of energy crashing through the chamber. Kaya's vision blurred, her head pounding with the force of it all. But she didn't let go. With a final, desperate surge of willpower, she forced the armor to bend to her will. The energy coursing through her reached a fever pitch, and then, with a blinding flash of light, everything went still. The heart stopped pulsing, the walls stopped shaking, and Kaya stood alone in the silent chamber, the armor humming softly against her skin. She had won, for now, but she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The air inside the alien station had shifted. Kaya stood in the center of the chamber, her heart still pounding from the confrontation with the voice that had declared itself as the architects of the armor. The heart-like structure at the center of the room glowed faintly, its pulse now slower, almost like a creature in a deep, slumbering breath. But everything about this place screamed that something was waiting, something inevitable. The quiet enveloped her, but her mind raced, sifting through the torrent of information, fear, and emotion that had flooded her since stepping into this nightmare. Her father, the armor, the architects. The pieces of the puzzle swirled around in her thoughts, and for the first time, the chaotic fragments began to settle, to make sense. The answer was there, hidden in plain sight. Her father's final words echoed in her mind. "Whatever you choose, don't let it break you." The architects had expected her to be another cog in their cycle, to be used, manipulated. The armor had been designed not to protect, but to control, to trap her in the same endless struggle her father had fallen into. But there was a subtle irony to all of this. an irony that the architects had failed to understand. Kaya wasn't like her father. For so long, she had been defined by her need to survive, to adapt to any situation thrown at her. It wasn't strength or resilience that had kept her alive. It was something simpler, something more human. Choice. She had learned to navigate the galaxy by making the right choices at the right moments, not through brute force or grand acts of heroism. She had never wanted to be the hero, never wanted to carry the weight of destiny on her shoulders. But the architects had underestimated that very thing. They had assumed she would follow the same path as those who came before her, like her father. But they didn't know Kaya. Her mind was clear now. She had the answer, the only answer. The armor, the ship, the architects, they were all part of a single system, a network that had been designed to ensnare those it chose. The armor wasn't an ally. It was a trap. But traps could be turned against their creators. Slowly, Kaya stepped forward, back toward the pulsing heart at the center of the chamber. Her body was tense, every muscle on edge, but her mind was calm. She wasn't going to run anymore. She was going to end this. The voice echoed once more, though quieter this time. You cannot fight what is already written. You are part of the cycle, just as your father was. Accept your fate. Kaya ignored the voice. She was done listening to invisible, omniscient entities that thought they could dictate her future. As she approached the heart, the blue glow of her armor intensified, the circuits pulsing in rhythm with the energy radiating from the station. The connection was undeniable now, but that connection was the key to everything. Fate's overrated, Kaya muttered, her voice steady, filled with a calm confidence that hadn't been there before. She extended her hand toward the heart. The moment her fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of energy shot through her, far more intense than anything she had felt before. It was as if the station itself was trying to consume her, to bind her to its will. The voice grew louder, more insistent. Do not resist. You will only destroy yourself. But Kaya wasn't resisting, not in the way the architects thought. She closed her eyes, focusing on the armor. She could feel it humming around her, the circuits glowing brighter as they drew power from the station. But instead of letting the armor control her, she did something the architects hadn't anticipated. She let go. The armor had always sought control over her body, over her mind. But what if it had never truly been about control? What if the power lay in surrendering, in giving up the very thing the architects believed she would cling to, power itself? Kaya had spent her entire life making choices that kept her alive, that gave her an edge in a universe that didn't care if she lived or died. And now, standing in the center of an ancient, alien station, bound by a cycle that had trapped countless others before her, she realized the only way to break free was to choose the one thing the architects hadn't foreseen, to reject the armor entirely. The surge of energy intensified, the station's walls trembling violently as if it were reacting to her decision. The voice became frantic now, its calm demeanor gone, replaced with a sharp urgency. You cannot defy the cycle. You will perish without the armor's protection. But Kaya wasn't listening. Her thoughts were razor-sharp, her focus unwavering. The armor wasn't protection, it was a prison, and she had the key. With a final breath, Kaya willed the armor to release her. The circuits flared one last time, and then, with a brilliant flash of blue light, they dimmed. The armor peeled away from her skin, its pieces dissolving into the air like dust. The weight lifted from her shoulders, and for the first time since she had put it on, Kaya felt free. The connection between her and the station severed instantly. The heart pulsed violently, its rhythm becoming erratic as if it were malfunctioning. The walls of the chamber trembled, cracks spreading through the strange organic structure. Kaya stumbled back, watching as the heart began to collapse in on itself, its energy flickering wildly. The station was unraveling, breaking apart at the seams, its power source destabilized by the very thing it had sought to control. The voice echoed one last time, weak and fading. You will regret this. And then, silence. The station groaned one final time before the lights went out, plunging the chamber into darkness. Kaya stood there for a moment, her breath coming in slow, steady waves. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her, But it wasn't the same suffocating pressure she had felt before. This was different. This was the weight of freedom. She had made her choice. And in doing so, she had broken the cycle. There was no grand explosion, no cataclysmic battle to end all battles. It had been simple, deceptively so. The architects had relied on their victims to fight, to struggle, to try and wield the power of the armor against them. But the real power had always been in choosing not to play the game at all. As the last remnants of the station's power flickered out, Kaya made her way back toward the docking bay. The ship she had arrived on was still there, silent and dark. Its systems offline now that the station's control had been severed. But it didn't matter. She didn't need the ship anymore. Kaya stepped through the open hatch, her footsteps echoing softly in the empty vessel. The ship felt different now, smaller, less imposing. Without the armor, without the connection to the architects, it was just another relic of a forgotten past. As she stood in the cockpit, looking out at the vast expanse of stars beyond, a strange sense of peace settled over her. The questions that had haunted her for so long, the mystery of the armor, her father's fate, the architect's grand designs, had all been answered, but not in the way she had expected. Her father had been trapped by his own belief in the power of the armor, in the idea that he had to fight against the architects. But Kaya had seen the truth. The cycle wasn't about fighting. It was about surrendering the very thing the architects used to control their victims. And now it was over. Kaya activated the ship's systems manually, setting a course for the nearest star system. The engines hummed to life, the ship vibrating beneath her feet. As the stars stretched out before her, the enormity of what she had just done settled in. The cycle was broken. The architects, whoever or whatever they had been, were gone. The armor, the station, all of it gone. And with it, the burden of a destiny she had never wanted. For the first time in a long time, Kaya felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. It wasn't the grand, world-shattering kind of hope. It was quiet, understated. But it was there, lingering at the edges of her mind. She didn't know what the future held, but she didn't need to. She had made her choice, and that was enough. As the ship's autopilot engaged and the stars blurred into streaks of light, Kaya leaned back in her seat, letting out a long, steady breath. This was it, the end of one journey and the beginning of something unknown. Not something greater, not something destined, but something hers. And that was all she needed. The ship sped through the vast expanse of space, leaving the dead station behind. Kaya watched the stars pass by, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She had chosen, and she was free. The end.